Hello friends, I am Carmen Schenk and welcome to my voice journal. That's a name I've been thinking about for the last couple of weeks, voice journal. I feel like I'm in the process of trying to find my voice all over again. I've had a YouTube channel, I don't know, for 4 or 5 years, but I never really felt like it was what I wanted it to be. Like, it didn't seem like I found my ability to be as authentic as I wanted to be. And so I think what I'm trying to do, I took some time away because my mom was in hospice for 2 years, and for parts of that process, I just didn't have the bandwidth to be online and to be talking and to be in front of a camera. And then following her death in August of last year, I started grad school in September. I'm going back for the seminary school training that I wanted when I was in my 20s. And in my 20s, after I got out of college and looking around at my environment as a young woman in the Mennonite church, it just didn't seem to make any sense to ultra practical me to go another 40 grand into debt and get a seminary degree when I knew I probably was not hireable in the Mennonite community. So we're still dealing with inequality between women and men in the Mennonite church and in the church in general. And there's a lot of other inequalities that we're dealing with. So I'm not unique in that. My story is certainly not a unique story in the faith community. So thankfully, some time ago, my pastor just looked at me and said, "Look, you need to go and see what scholarships are available," because there were people that went to school with him who had pretty close to a full ride scholarship, which meant that they went to school without paying a lot of money. And I'm like, okay. Maybe I'll just explore that, because that felt like a really amazing kernel of hope. Because I had looked at the website at some point and realized that seminary education is going to cost about $45,000, and so I said to myself, yes, I will do that when I have that kind of money and I can do that without going into debt for it. So I contacted them and set up a campus visit, and their recruiter guy set up for me to meet different people, to set in on a class, to meet different professors. It was so much fun. And I walked in and I met him. He was just a really welcoming, gregarious guy. And we sat down in the foyer there and talked a little bit. One of the first things out of his mouth was talking about the financial aid that was available, the scholarships that were available. And I'm just like, whoa, really? And he said that there were a number of people, sorry, I got a little thing. And he said that there were a number of people who were going to school for very little money, that he had gone through a financial aid package where the total had come to zero for their semester. And I'm sitting there like, wow, I hope it's true, but I'm afraid to believe, that it's actually true. And so you can't get a financial aid package until you sign up for classes. It's just, I guess that's what they do to keep it so that they're not making financial aid packages and not actually getting any students. I don't know, whatever. So I went ahead and signed up for classes, and it turned out that my first semester of grad school cost me $600, which is amazing. Really, really and truly amazing. So it's a possibility for me at this point in my life where it never felt possible before, and that feels like a God thing. I think higher education institutions are dealing with COVID fallout, where people just can't afford anything other than the basics. And so, and there's been a tremendous amount of really generous scholarships. And so those two things together are making it possible for me to go to school without spending a fortune. And so while I am very well aware that I am very privileged and very, very privileged to have the time and the ability to go to school, it feels very precious. It feels just incredibly precious. And I remind myself of that when it's at the end of the semester and I've got 3 exams in 3 days and I'm like ready to pull out my hair because I'm freaking because there's so much at once. That it is a privilege to be there and that I am having absolutely the time of my life. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience. So I thought that's kind of like big picture of where I'm at the moment. I'm dealing with the grief of the loss of my mom. I am dealing with some of the realizations that I have discovered recently about various kind of dynamics in my family and some of the choices that I've made and how they really affect me and the people around me, and thinking a lot about mindset. I mean, if you've been around on my channel for a while, you know I talk about mindset in terms of simplicity and how life-changing it was for us to sell off a bunch of stuff, move into a tiny house, and to begin to develop some simplicity mindsets. So I feel like the more I have paid attention and tried to be intentional about my life, and the more I have really dedicated myself to learning, the more I have been able to live the way I wanted to live, as opposed to just living in the path that's expected of me. So, I'm feeling like that's a good direction. I mean, the direction is not always easy, but it's a good one. So, one of the things I have been thinking about lately came from School of Leadership training that was this week at Seminary. And I was listening to a guy talk about how it was for him as a black man in a wheelchair. He had cerebral palsy, and how it has been for him to experience church. And he tells the story of not really growing up in a family that went to church, but they lived across the street from a church. And, they'd hear the music and the people were coming and going. And there was a curiosity about what's happening over there. And so at some point he decided he was going to go across the street and go to church. And there he was on the sidewalk, looking up all those stairs at the door of the church. And finally a couple of deacons saw him and came and got him and carried him up those stairs. And he talked a little bit, different stories. I mean, she's a really powerful storyteller about how it was for him to be a part of that congregation. It was a very formative experience in terms of his faith, but it was also where he hit up against some real hard points that were hard for his heart, in a context of coming to a loving God, but also having these challenges of access and challenges to equality and challenges to I'm not quite sure how to articulate this, but this idea that we talk about everyone is welcome, but there's no ramp and there's no, everything's up a couple of stairs, and everybody has the church service on the main floor and then goes downstairs for an hour for the fellowship hour after church. And he talked about various different things. I mean, even just Sunday after Sunday after Sunday being a child and being anointed with oil and people praying for the spirit of infirmity to leave him, and how damaging it is. Some of those things about who you are and how you are, and how Jesus is embodied in us, even if we don't seem perfect in the world's sense. So it was such an eye-opening conversation, and I just appreciated it so much. So one of the points that he made that I just really struck me was this idea that you can have a ramp to the door of your church and have a sign on the outside that says everybody welcome. But then when it really comes down to it, still not be a welcoming church, you know? And he gave the example of churches with pews, and so there's a limited number of places that a person in a wheelchair can be, and so those decisions are made without a disabled person in the conversation. So, you know, they'll make a little space where there's a little the one pew is in a little closer, but there's like one space there, and there's maybe, you know, a area in the back where somebody in a wheelchair could be. But as far as autonomy and agency for someone in a wheelchair to choose where they want to sit, it doesn't exist in most congregations, in most buildings. And, you know, there may be a table, and we have this metaphor of coming to the table, but there are different kinds of tables. Some tables you can pull a wheelchair under, and some tables you couldn't. And so again, there's this kind of subtle access issue that all of the things that I take for granted, you know, being able to go up a couple of stairs, or, you know, the entrance is around a corner, and well, I mean, you know, the older these churches are, some of the, I mean, I used to go to a church that was like built by committee or something. There were stairs, and there were hallways, and there was ups, and there was downs. I mean, that building was all over it was a city block, and that it was just all over the place. And accessibility, forget about it. I mean, there was literally no place for somebody in a wheelchair, in any sense. And so that's something I've really been thinking about. And it's an opportunity for each of us to find our way to embrace the discomfort we feel, and I think we maybe all feel it, between not knowing what to say, not knowing how to be, not knowing quite how to interact, being a little uncomfortable, feeling a little awkward, but taking a minute to, if you go to church, and if not, that's fine, no worries. But if you walk into your church building on a Sunday morning or any day of the week, to just look around and make a point of thinking about, would a person in a wheelchair be able to get in the door I just got in? I mean, not only is it flat so they can roll in, is it possible to navigate that door while rolling a wheelchair? I mean, is it possible to even enter without assistance? Is it possible to get to the place where there is communion served without going up a step, or without having to be carried or somehow moved in an uncomfortable manner? There's a lot about that I hadn't even thought. So I'll probably talk more about that in future sessions, but I just thought that was really some interesting stuff, and it sparked some surprising kind of thoughts for me, because I had not heard people talk about some of these issues the way he did, and it really was eye-opening, and I just appreciated that so much. So as I move forward in starting this YouTube channel all over again, and I made from time to time reference earlier work that I've done on this channel about simplicity, about living simply, about living in a small house, about lowering your bills so that you have more freedom. I made reference that from time to time, but for the most part, you can find the classes that I've taught on how to have a capsule wardrobe, those kinds of things, about learning how to live more simply and the simplicity mindsets. You can learn more about that on my website, but I may not be talking about that a tremendous amount. I think the future of this channel is probably more about the things that I'm learning in seminary, a couple of books that I have picked up in addition. I have a really real gift for buying books. I don't have necessarily the greatest gift about reading them, but there's so much I want to learn. So it's easy for me to pick up books here and there. So Over break, I've read a couple of things. I got a couple of books on audiobooks, and so yeah, there's some things I'm really enjoying exploring. My very favorite thing is to have a book on and just be weaving away. So if you have come to my channel because I'm a weaver, clearly this is still my happy place, and a place of contemplative, just a meditative practice. Weaving is contemplation and mental health for me. That creativity of being able to be here and to be present in this space, and be interacting purely on the purely in color, because color, I feel like color is kind of my mother tongue. I feel like that's the that's my first language. So that all of that feels very close to my heart. So stick around. If you are new to this channel, absolutely welcome. If you have been here a while and this feels like a departure from what I've done in the past, it may be, or it may not. I'm still the same person. So I'm a little older, a little wiser, and I have a little bit more loss. I'm very aware of the loss of my mom, and I'm also very aware that my loss of my mom is not unique, that this is a circle of life. We lose our parents, and some people have lost their parents really young, and there's nothing particularly unique to me about grieving. So if that has been also your life story, then you absolutely have my solidarity as you walk through that journey as well. So I'm sending you so much love. I hope these kind of videos will kind of get into a groove, that I will kind of get out of that kind of I don't know what the heck I'm doing phase and start to get a little bit more confident. I hope I will grow some skills that will make this easier and better for me to be more effective at this, and more pleasurable for you to hear. So thank you. If you have hung around for the full 17 minutes of this video, then you already have my absolute undying affection. And so thanks for being present with me, and I look forward to more of these conversations about faith, about how do we open the doors, how do we welcome, not just by putting a ramp outside the church, but how do we really welcome people, and work through our own awkward insecurity about people that are different than us, because these are conversations that we really need to have. And honestly, this is well past time. It is so past time that we talk about some of these things. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. See you again soon.